Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Heathrow Airport. We've been well received. They, of course, will accept political leaders from all parties. There is no prejudice here. This is, after all, not a football club. Now, the cost of living crisis is very, very real. And as we approach the Easter weekend, one of the big conversations that families will be having is, where should we go for our summer holiday? Or indeed, can we afford this year, with the cost of living crisis, to go on our summer holiday? And there is no doubt that government net zero policies are damaging the pockets of absolutely everybody. It isn't just the cost of their fuel bills, although that's very significant, and there seems to be this misapprehension that if we produced our own oil and gas, it would come at the same price as oil and gas that we import from around the rest of the world, which is, of course, utter rot, as we were importing oil last week at $150 a barrel, because it costs money to move stuff around the world. So the first point to make, produce our own oil and gas in this country, everybody's bills would be cheaper. Secondly, from net zero lunacy, we've seen the deindustrialisation of Britain. And these families, many of whom, of course, have lost well-paid jobs in those sectors, but these families aren't just hit with domestic fuel bills, aren't just hit with filling up their car, they're also hit with going on their summer holidays. I was in Brussels when this concept of air passenger duty was introduced, and the great benefit of what Robert Jenrick is about to outline today is not just that it will make people's holidays cheaper, but it is also the fact that it is a Brexit benefit and not something we could do as members of the European Union. I hope Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are listening to that particular point. So, without further ado, I will introduce our Shadow Chancellor, Robert Jenrick.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Nigel. Exactly as Nigel said, we are the only party that is truly committed to cutting the cost of living. And you will have seen the announcements that we've made over the course of the last fortnight that have gone further than any political party, certainly further than Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer. We've said that we would ensure that the heating tax, VAT on domestic fuel, is scrapped under a future reform government, that we'd get rid of the green levies and taxes that have been added by stealth onto people's energy bills. And those two things together would reduce the average household's energy bill by £200. We've said that there should be an emergency cut in VAT on petrol and diesel at the pumps, as government after government around the world has been doing, from Australia to Sweden to Spain to Portugal. And of course, that Rachel Reeves should scrap the increase in fuel duty that is coming down the line in September. Only a Chancellor as out of touch as Rachel Reeves would continue to hold to the line that fuel duty should actually be going up later this year rather than coming down. And today, we are announcing that we want to make it cheaper for families to go on holiday. As Nigel has said, this is a time of year where millions of Brits will be going on holiday, catching some sun in Mallorca or Tenerife, and millions more will be sat at home over the Easter holidays thinking about booking a family holiday. And this year, of all years, that will be a tough decision because household finances are just so tight. And so we want to make it cheaper. That's why we're announcing today that a reform government in our first budget will get rid of the family holiday tax. Air passenger duty will be gone for short-haul family trips. That will save a family, on average, £45 on their flights, whether that's abroad, or £48 if they're going on holiday here in the UK. That means that if you were catching a flight, for example, as a family to Malaga, you would save 23% on the cost of your flights. Now, we appreciate that's not a huge amount of money, but it's an important saving that will make it just a bit easier to have that family trip, to have a bit of fun, to get away and spend time with your loved ones. This will apply to any holiday that is being booked for an adult travelling with those under the age of 18. That could be a mum and dad taking their kids on holiday. It could be grandparents. It could be uncles and aunts. And it can be school trips as well. At Reform, we don't like stealth taxes. We don't like taxes on people having fun, whether that's having pints in the pub with your mates or going on holiday with your family. We are going to find every way possible to lighten the load and enable families to have fun, spend time together, enjoy trips abroad or here in the UK this year. And tomorrow, remember, Rachel Reeves is actually increasing this tax. So whilst we're cutting it at Reform on the 1st of April, April Fool's Day, of course, Rachel Reeves is hiking this same tax. That's the difference between Reform and this Labour government. We're going to cut taxes, cut your bills, and cut the cost of living. Thank you very much indeed.
Let us start our list of media questions. First up, Katie Austin from the BBC.
Thank you. Good morning. Just first of all, I think I'm right in saying that most flights in this country are actually taken by a relatively small proportion of people who are relatively wealthy. Does this policy not disproportionately benefit the better off? And also, would you encourage people to go on a Great British holiday and support the UK tourism industry?
Well, of course we'd encourage the Great British Holiday. I personally take them myself. But you know what? The weather's unreliable. And actually staying in this country is often very much more expensive than it is going away on a package holiday. So you talk about those who are not so well off in society. For them, with a couple of kids, they will undoubtedly have a cheaper holiday by going overseas than they will by being in many parts of this country. And I regret that's the case, but it simply is. Look, as Robert has laid out very clearly, this particular cut is not designed at business travel and things like that. It is specifically designed for families with under 18s. And, there are many, 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 many millions of people on average incomes that want a week or two in the sunshine, and they work hard all week. And, I think one of the things that, I've been on the road now for a month, going around the country with another month to go, and the cost of living crisis is real. The choices families are facing is real. And those that go to work just feel they're being taxed more and more and able to do less and less with what's left over. So no, I think this is equitable and fair in every way. I really do. Thank you.
Yeah, look, we at Reform don't want to just hand out things to people on benefits, which seems to be the way that Rachel Reeves sees the world. We want to help working families. It's absolutely right that a family on a low or a middle income should be able to aspire to go on a family holiday. And the Treasury has always seen air passenger duty, the family holiday tax, as a stealth tax, where they can just load it up and up and up without thinking about the consequences for families. And as a tax it's like a sin tax. They think that people should feel ashamed about getting on a flight. We don't think there's any shame on going on a family holiday to Spain or to Turkey. Everyone should have the right to do that if they can. But the important point to stress is that this isn't just about flights to continental Europe. This is also flights within the UK. And in fact, the greatest beneficiaries of this tax cut will be people flying within the British Isles. So a family, say, from London, catching a flight down to Newquay in Cornwall or to the Highlands in Scotland, to Inverness Airport, they will save £48 rather than 45 quid if you were going to Europe. And the airports that have really campaigned for this, and I know welcoming it very strongly today, are not just big hub airports like Heathrow, but in particular are the regional airports who have been penalised by this tax for years. No government could help them out when we were part of the EU, because EU state aid rules prevented governments from taking action. It will be the likes of Newquay, Robin Hood Airport by Doncaster, Leeds Bradford, Belfast, Cardiff, you name it. They'll really benefit from this, and that's going to create jobs and help to sustain those airports, which are critical to regional economies.
Thank you. Keith Bayes, GB News.
Hi, Nigel. On the cost of living and energy, Labour say their solution is green policies. The Conservatives more North Sea drilling. How can Reform go further to protect British families with the cost of living? And if I may, with the UK-France small boats deal stalling and illegal crossings at record levels, What should the government be doing differently to protect families in this country from the huge numbers of people crossing illegally? Thank you.
Well, the deal with the French expires at midnight tonight. That will now be a total of £800 million that we've given them since 2014. The deal expires at midnight. The forecast tomorrow in the Channel, after quite a calm day today, is winds to be light and variable. Tomorrow will be a very busy day in the English Channel, and it wouldn't make any difference whether we agreed to a further 365 million or not. Even if the French do stop boats from crossing, the same people come back the next time there is a calm day. And it's all about pull factors. It's all about the fact you've got a 97.5% chance, whoever you are, of staying in the United Kingdom if you illegally cross the Channel in a small boat. And I think the public are getting angrier and angrier about this. Firstly, out of a sense of fairness. People who come here legally now have to go through quite a long, expensive process. The fact that those that come, that get waved through the system, go to the top of the social housing list. So there is the issue of fairness. And I would say that not a week goes by when we don't read of some genuinely horrific sexual assault committed in this country by young men who come from cultures in which women are not even classed as second-class citizens. And I would add to that I have believed for some years that the young men that are coming, who throw their passports and their ID documents into the Channel at the 12-mile line, as they're encouraged to do, and I filmed it, I've actually filmed them doing it, pose a threat to national security. We have no idea whether people coming in are ISIS sympathizers, whether they sympathize with the Ayatollah's regime. And frankly, the only way to deal with this is to detain and deport. It is the only way. I have spoken to Jordan Bardella, who is the short odds-on favourite to be the next French president, and I've said to him that if necessary, we will tow the boats back. The Royal Marines will tow the boats back to the beaches of northern France. And he gulped a bit when I first said it. But then he realised if people know they can't cross the Channel, then the lives of those people living in Boulogne, Calais, Wimereux, all those towns in northern France, which frankly have become hellish over the last few years, would improve as well. So we are absolutely resolute. But none of this will happen. None of this will happen. All the while we stay part of the European Convention on the outdated European Convention on Human Rights. On the Labour point, well, it's green energy that's put bills up. We've been subsidising green energy for a quarter of a century and putting the subsidy for that onto people's domestic bills, and no one told them. No one told them, because everybody agreed. Everybody in Parliament agreed. And so you've had household bills 15 to 20% higher for best part of 2 decades to subsidise green energy. As for industry, it's been a catastrophe. The most expensive industrial energy prices in the world, 4 times the American average, although actually 6 to 8 times higher than what it would be in Texas or Chicago. The point I'm going to make again and again is that gas is not a global market price, it's very much a domestic market price because of the expense of liquefying, moving and regasifying. And so what Miliband has done is to lock in with the AR7 round very expensive electricity prices for the next 20 years with a proposed massive development of North Sea wind. And the one thing you can say for 100% certain is the more you rely on North Sea wind, the more you need plentiful, domestic, cheap gas supply to back it up when the turbines don't blow. So we're getting this wrong on every level. Miliband says it's a mixture of nuclear and renewables, but it's not, because nuclear produces 24/7, 365 days a year baseload power. They haven't got a clue what they're doing. They don't understand how commodity markets work, and it's a disaster. As for the Tories, who killed the North Sea? The Conservative government. They're the ones that put 75% super taxes on North Sea exploration. Some estimates say that's cost us as much as $50 billion worth of investment since that was done. And bear in mind that the Norwegians last year on their half of the North Sea, in some of the same fields, launched 49 new drill sites, and we launched 0. It was the Conservatives that forbade the development of onshore gas, which, by the way, would be even cheaper still. And it was the Conservatives very reluctant to issue any new licences in the North Sea. So for Kemi Badenoch to say, get Britain drilling, I mean, she was the high priestess of renewables and green energy and net zero policy. I would just recommend to people, don't believe a single word they say, judge them by their actions, not by their words.
Very good.
Very good. Right, we'll move on. And thanks, Keith, for your 5 questions. Rhiannon James from the Press Association. Oh, there you are. That's an improvement.
Hello. I wanted to ask you about the grooming gangs inquiry. We've had the terms of reference published this morning, and I just wanted to ask you both what faith you have in the inquiry that it will deliver for victims.
Absolutely none. Absolutely none. I mean, I've wanted a national grooming gangs inquiry. I've done everything I can to try and push the government into it. The problem is, any third-party inquiry is a waste of space unless you can subpoena police officers, social services, civil servants who were all part, of turning the collective blind eye. And I think everything this government has done on this issue is an attempt to literally kick the can down the road, to not fully open this up. I am in touch with quite a few of the victims of this. In fact, 1 or 2 of whom want to be candidates of ours as we go ahead over the course of the next few years. And they're very, very angry that they've never been taken seriously, right, in some cases from the age of 12 or 13 years old, up until the present day. I have no confidence at all. And I think this, and frankly, I think, especially since the Gorton and Denton by-election, we see government policy being dictated by their fears about this growing sectarian vote that is there in our inner cities and in too many northern towns, and fear of this leaching off to the Greens. I think it's even affecting our foreign policy as well. So I'm sad to say, no confidence whatsoever. It's also interesting to note that it isn't just in this country that we look upon this with shame. The rest of the world looks upon us and shakes its head. How on earth could we have sunk to this? Thank you. Robert?
Well, yes, you can remember that the Labour Party voted against an inquiry over and over again in the House of Commons. They wasted the entirety of last year, in which they didn't seem to be able to get this up and running. They got all sorts of other inquiries up and running, some very fast, and are now rushing to implement their findings. Not this one. They struggled to find people to appoint. The people that they were appointing didn't have the confidence of the victims. They didn't choose a judge to chair it, who might be better at scrutinising some of the individuals who have to go before it. What is the logical inference to draw from this? It's that they don't really want to get to the truth of this. They're worried about what they will say, particularly about Labour councils in some parts of the country where this has been very prevalent, places like Bradford, for example. And they're worried about, exactly as Nigel said, this Islamist sectarian vote that they've become ever more reliant upon.
And let alone the truth finally coming out about London, where there's been every attempt to say nothing to see here, and yet, just little piece by little piece, more and more evidence gathers of young women being trafficked to London, frankly, from all over many different parts of the country. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Martin Brown, Daily Express.
Thank you. Just could I get your response to reports this morning that Donald Trump might end the crisis or the conflict in Iran without securing the Strait of Hormuz, or do you think he should see it through to the end?
I don't think we should take literally anything right now that Donald Trump says or is said about Donald Trump. I mean, the last thing he's going to do, or the last thing his colleagues in the White House are going to do, is to give the Iranians any idea of what their true intentions are. And frankly, I don't know. Was it to remove nuclear capability? Was it aimed at regime change? I don't think any of us quite know the absolute truth about that. I think if given the threats this week in the Red Sea as well, and given the Straits of Hormuz are only open selectively, mostly for Pakistani, at the moment, vessels taking oil to China, I think if Donald Trump was to walk away now and oil prices remain very high or get higher, I think that would be politically not the way he or his Republican colleagues would want it to end. So I very, very much doubt that those rumours are true. I very, very much doubt those rumours are true. But hey, as I say, trying to read what's really in the minds of people in the White House right at the moment is, pre-guessing that is a bit of a mug's game right now. OK, Emily Smith from the Daily Telegraph.
Thank you. So the government's been very clear in targeting cost of living support to the poorest households, largely those on benefits. Would you keep that targeted approach and provide support to people on benefits, or do you think there's a case for more universal support? Thank you.
I think there's a case for cheaper prices when it comes to energy. I mean, this nonsense that they've cut £150 off energy bills, right? And don't forget, they were elected saying they would reduce energy bills by 300 quid. They're actually up over 200 quid. We've cut, but all they've done is they've put that onto general taxation, which means those that work and pay tax are paying even more tax to subsidise that reduction for other people. And this is, the biggest single divide in the country right now? People talk about divides, clashes of culture. The biggest single divide that I'm seeing as I go around the country day after day is the split between those that work, feel they're working longer hours than ever before, paying more tax than ever before, able to afford less for themselves and their families than ever before, and as they put it to me, the people next door who don't get up till midday, where Deliveroo seems to bring all the food, and where sometimes in the afternoons it smells of slightly strange tobacco. And the level of resentment now to those who are choosing not to work as a lifestyle from those who do work. And the fact we've got about 1.5 million people who are working, who genuinely would be better off if they were not working. And that is a massive divide in this country. And, we as a party have very much picked a side here. We are on the side of Alarm Clock Britain. Right. We're on the side of those that get up and go to work. We're on the side of the 4.4 million people who are sole traders, the 1.5 million others who are directors of their own small limited companies, running shops or whatever, or computer programmers or whatever services they are providing. And that's not to say that we don't want to live in a civilised society that carries its weak. We just think the definition of those that should be carried has gone far, far too wide.
Correct. Well, you say Rachel Reeves is doing this or that. Well, I haven't seen anything that Rachel Reeves is doing. She's holding meetings and summits every day. Sometimes people don't even turn up to these summits. They refuse to turn up because she seems to have no authority as Chancellor. She's done a very small amount of targeted support for those who have oil heating. Nothing else for anybody else. We have set out a very clear package of support. We want to cut VAT on domestic heating, which would be a significant change. We want to get rid of the taxes and levies that have been added by stealth onto people's energy bills. That would be £200 off the average family's energy bill. We want to have an emergency cut in VAT on fuel at the pumps, as many, many other countries around the world have chosen to do, and more seem to be doing every passing day. And we've said to Rachel Reeves, accept the inevitable and scrap this increase in fuel duty that's coming down the line in September, and which she'll have to legislate for by the end of the spring if she wants to do. Those are some practical things that we could do now. And what we're proposing is fully funded. We're not just going to borrow more. We're not going to do what Liz Truss did the last time around, where it led to a lot of concern in the international markets. We're actually going to cut public spending on the things which are obviously not in the interests of working people in this country, like paying benefits to non-British nationals, like putting up asylum seekers in hotels, the net zero subsidies that we've been talking about today, and above all, by cutting welfare. No more access to PIP for very mild mental health conditions like anxiety. Exactly as Nigel said, we've chosen a side. We're on the side of working people. We want to cut the waste that's particularly being spent on welfare at the moment and use that to cut taxes where we can and to bring down people's bills. That's Reform's approach.
Yeah, and Roberts led the debate on this. The Conservatives are now following, and in time Rachel Reeves will U-turn. There's a prediction for you. And on the general cost of welfare, you'll be hearing more from us in the coming weeks about the true cost of the Boris wave.
Yeah.
And it is genuinely horrifying. I thought it was interesting to see Jenny Russell in the Times yesterday writing on this very subject. This is genuinely horrifying. 3.8 million people coming into Britain and only 20% on work permits. We'll be telling you a lot more about that and the hidden cost of that over the course of the next few weeks. Thank you very much indeed. Let us go to Natasha Clark, LBC.
Thank you, Mr Farage. We're obviously seeing prices going up at the pumps. You've said what you would do on that. We don't have any issues with supply at the moment. But do you think the government...
At the moment?
At the moment. Do you think that the government should be looking at fuel rationing? Should we be looking to subsidise public transport, as nations are doing? And can I just get your response to the doctors' strikes, which is meant to start next week? Do you think they should go ahead? Thank you so much.
Well, on the doctors' strikes, unusually, Keir Starmer has taken a strong position. It's the first, I mean, there's a first time for everything, I suppose. And I think, the Prime Minister's position on this is the right position, the correct position. And it's rarely I say that. The fact you even ask a question, the fact that at number 10 yesterday, there was a debate going on about whether we might need energy rationing in a country that most geologists would agree has 10 billion barrels. Think about that number. 10 billion barrels of untapped oil and natural gas. We should not be having this debate. We should be a major energy exporter. And frankly, everything else that's being talked about is papering over the cracks. We would provide tens of thousands of very well-paid jobs, increased money for the revenue, energy security at a time when the world's a very, very dangerous place, and yes, cheaper prices. And I'm going to keep saying that, and they can deny it in Westminster as long as they like. Even Badenoch yesterday seemed not to understand how this works. Cheaper prices, especially gas. Gas would be massively cheap. Just think about it. Our biggest supplier of natural gas now is America, through LNG. So you take the gas out of the ground, you liquefy it, yeah? You take it from the Midwest to the East Coast ports, you transport it 3,500 miles across the Atlantic, you then have to take the liquid and regasify it, and then take it to where it needs to be. That is not the spot price. That is not the spot price. That is a massive percentage premium. And somehow, and I was a commodity trader for some years, many years actually, there seems to be no comprehension or understanding of how this works. And I'm going to keep banging on about this until people finally get it. Robert?
Yeah. I mean, Nigel is currently the only politician in British politics who's making the argument that gas in particular, if we get it from our own seas, can actually be used to reduce prices here for households. And that's a point that you see in the United States. I was reading Dieter Helm, one of our country's big experts on energy, was making this point himself the other day. But every other leader seems to be oblivious to this. We would make use of every drop of our own natural resources. We'd use that to bring down prices here, to create tens of thousands of good jobs, and to get in tens of billions in extra tax revenues, which we can use to fund the sorts of things we've been talking about today, and more, to lighten the load for working people across the country. What's Labour doing? Absolutely nothing. These pointless summits are being held in number 10, and yet the Prime Minister claims he can't sign off Rosebank or Jackdaw, these fields that are there for the taking. He's behaving like a bystander in a crisis, not a leader.
And Jackdaw could be a major producer of gas within 12 weeks, maybe 10 weeks. Yep. So actually, you're talking here about decisions that could have real impacts very, very quickly indeed. Athena Stavru, The Independent.
Thank you. On Sunday, Zia Youssef defended your party's vetting process after what he called a series of abhorrent incidents. This included a picture that surfaced of a Welsh Parliament candidate appearing to do a Nazi salute. Do you think your vetting process is up to scratch now? And are you confident it will be effective enough to prevent any more unsuitable candidates being picked for the local elections, for example?
So in Wales, we have announced a list of 96 people, right? And of course, there is more scrutiny of our candidates than there is of any other party, because we're the new kids on the block and we're the challengers to the established order in this country, the first serious challenger for 100 years. So we get it, we understand it. You know, we vet people, we ask them to tell us the truth, we ask them for their social media handles, we do all those things. Sometimes people lie to you. And they might be using social media handles that you have no way of finding, just as one example. So we've lost 1 out of 96 in Wales. The other 95 haven't been scrutinised very fully. Plaid, our main challenger, have sacked one of their candidates for saying things, well, basically the open encouragement of paedophilia against minors. And I think you'll find a lot more stories coming about Plaid candidates. The absolute truth is that this is a massive set of elections. There are up to 5,000 seats through Scotland, Wales, London, council seats around the country, and every single party will have difficulties with some of their candidates. I shudder to think what some of the Green candidates have been saying that might be standing in Birmingham or London or anywhere else. So we are doing our absolute damnedest to get this right. But sometimes, if people withhold the truth from you, it's very difficult. But when we do get such things, we act very swiftly. You know, we believe in free speech. We believe in opinions. We might not we might not even share some of the opinions that one or two of our candidates have put out there. But I think we're dealing with it as effectively, if not more effectively, than the others. And I really, really mean that. You know, I accept that at the last general election, basically, there was no vetting, really, or no proper vetting. But, you know, I came into this in the general election too late for any of that to be effective, and prior to that, the party did not have the resources to do it. So, you know, I accept that has left a little bit of a millstone from then, but I think you'll find we're doing pretty well now. We have got a couple more. Oliver Harries, Politics UK.
For Nigel, Zach Polanski's polling with 16 to 24-year-olds has shot up to 51%, while Reforms has petered off to around 8%. Critics often point to the older age crowds attending your local election rallies. Do you worry Reform is becoming the party of the middle-aged and old? And are you concerned that not having the youth on your side could significantly harm your party's prospects come the time of the next general election? Thank you very much.
I don't recognise those figures at all. In fact, the last few times I've looked at numbers, the number of 16 to 18-year-olds that would vote Reform was in the middle high 20s, almost reflective of our percentage across the whole of the country. And you know something? I was in Hull last night, right? And we advertised in Hull, we were doing a public event. 950 people came, of whom 80% were not members of Reform, and most of whom, when spoken to, had never been to a political event in their lives. And I wonder, you know, whether Keir Starmer would get a turnout like that in Hull, or whether Kemi Badenoch would, or whether Ed Davey would, or so. I don't quite recognise those numbers. However, you know, what Polanski is doing is tapping into, you know, a sort of university student, half indoctrinated youth who find Marxism very appealing. And this is not uncommon. This happens once every generation or so. Real hard left politics becomes popular. And in doing so, of course, you know, he's seriously damaging the Labour Party. Now, quite how this coalition works, quite how people who support trans issues can align with people who are extreme social conservatives, as is the case in many of the Denton and Gorton and Denton voters, I just don't know. How that coalition holds, I just don't understand it. I just don't know. But I will say this very quickly, slight tangent to your question, but very quickly. The Labour Party's in bigger trouble than anyone's realised. Because you're going to see inner city populations, areas with big Muslim populations, areas with big student populations. One can think of 4/5 London boroughs this year in which Labour are going to be wiped out. But then go further north. Go into the West Midlands. Go up to the northwest. Go to the northeast. Go to South Wales. And you will find very large numbers of people who've been Labour families for generations are going to vote Reform. So the Labour Party is facing some... I genuinely believe, despite the massive win at the last general election, that what the Labour Party is facing is actually existential.
Yeah.
And I think that will be, of the many interesting results that come out on the night of May the 7th, just quickly on South Wales, it's big, just think about it. You go back to Keir Hardie, Merthyr Tydfil, 1890s. You go on to giant figures in the Labour movement. Nye Bevan, Michael Foot, Neil Kinnock, and so on and so forth. And they've basically held those seats since 1918. And if you believe the opinion polls, they're now on 10%. So that's where Polanski's having a real impact. And no, I actually think you'll find that a significant number of young people and by the way, if they do lower the vote to 16, the Greens will do very well, we will do well, and Labour will do terribly. Thank you. Right, last question on this little round is from Inaya Imar, CBS. Hello.
Hi, thank you, Ms. Farage. On energy and the cost of living, originally Reform seemingly backed America in its war against Iran, but the polls have shown obviously it's quite unpopular, and Trump is also quite unpopular amongst UK voters, and there is worry that the conflict is going to significantly increase energy prices. Are you worried about your proximity to Trump and the wider kind of MAGA movement? And do you think that the Iran conflict is going to help or hinder Reform's prospects?
Look, I think that the position I made absolutely clear from the very first moment of this was we should not have blocked the Americans from using Diego Garcia and or RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire. And I think that was a big, big mistake. And I think we should have supported the Americans, and I haven't wavered in my view on that for one single moment. Our Prime Minister, of course, said, no, you can't. And then despite that, Iranian missiles were aimed at an RAF base in Cyprus. And then he U-turns and says, yes, you can. And then he says, we won't support at all. And then he said, we might support. And what he's doing is he's damaging the relationship with America. If I can be very, very selfish from a narrow British perspective, it's taken us 3 weeks and 1 day to send a single naval vessel to Cyprus. 3 weeks and 1 day to get one vessel. Without America, we are utterly defenseless. Even if we wanted to join militarily, we haven't got the capability. But I think we should have been supportive from the start. And on the broader point, look, I know lots of people in the MAGA movement. I know lots of members of the cabinet. I've known many of these people for many, many years. I've known Trump for a long time. And over the years, we've agreed on many things. And over the years, we've disagreed quite strongly on others. Ultimately, I want an independent United Kingdom. That's what I fought to leave the European Union for. I want a stronger commercial, cultural, military alliance with America as is possible. But, like cousins, we're not always going to agree. And will I be judged by the British electorate on the fact that I know the man and I've been to Mar-a-Lago? No, I don't believe I will for a moment. I think this is about what we need to do here, but one of those is defence and security. And what the Americans will demand after this debacle is that we start to become a more serious player again. Because apart from our special forces, there isn't really much now the Americans respect about our military. And when you think there are hundreds of our ex-special forces veterans now facing inquiries for actions that happened 50 years ago, under the Human Rights Act, the Americans are becoming even more worried as to whether we are of any use whatsoever. Thank you very much indeed. Yes.
One more, I think.
You weren't on the list.
Yeah, it's my fault actually, not Henry's at all. Ben Quinn from the Guardian. You're doing your bit as committed good Europeans today for this attempt to sort of keep links with the continent alive. What would a reform government do in relation to the youth experience scheme which Britain is currently negotiating with Brussels, which is designed to allow tens of thousands of Brits and Europeans to work and come to and fro?
Oh, no.
Would you repeal that, or if it was agreed, or how do you feel about it?
No. This will always be one-way traffic. There'll always be 3 to 4 times the number of Europeans coming to Britain as Britons that choose to go to Europe, as Europe isn't actually very sexy anymore. There are more exciting parts of the world to go to on gap years or for short-term work. Somehow, Frankfurt these days just isn't that appealing. I worry hugely that the Spanish have made the catastrophic error of just granting 500,000 people, mostly young people, total amnesties without a clue who they are, what their links to terrorism may or may not be. And we are living in an age of increased global insecurity where national borders and protecting national interests matters more and more. And I think the Youth Mobility Scheme falls at that first hurdle, if at nothing else. And it's just an attempt by the government to completely undo Brexit. And, you know, as we've done today with air passenger duty, there are freedoms with Brexit we could exploit in our own interests, and I just think this attempt to pretty much willfully break his manifesto pledges on this are signs of a Chancellor and a Prime Minister who are just totally out of ideas.
Just on the war.
And I just say on that, there's 1 million young people in this country who are not in education, employment or training. 1 million. And it's rising. So what should be the first priority of Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves? Get British young people into jobs, not get people from Hungary or Spain or Portugal coming here to the UK. A reform government are going to put British interests first. We're going to help British young people to get those jobs.
Right, last question.
Yeah, on the war, you said there's no it's a mug scheme in reading people's minds in the White House. Do you worry that your association and long-term friendship with Donald Trump is now beginning to damage you with reforms based and with wider voters out there?
Well, I'm not going to lie about it, am I? I'm not going to pretend that I don't know him. I do. And I think what he's done on the border is admirable. Admirable. I mean, there's someone making a promise and actually keeping it. I think what he's done with America's energy, certainly in his first term, utterly transformative. Why is America growing at 4%? Energy is absolutely at the centre of that, because you can't even... I mean, I talked about manufacturing earlier. I mean, forget data centres. This government talks about AI. Forget it. We can't do it. They use more electricity than were ever used by the heavy industries of the past. So there are things he's done that I agree with hugely, and there are things he's done I haven't agreed with. And the American and the British public can judge that. But, you know, he is not dictating policy to me. I'm dictating policy to me. But I do genuinely believe, as I said earlier to Anaya, I genuinely believe that the economic, the cultural, and the military linkage between our two nations is absolutely vital. And I'm going to repeat the point, or finish on this point. Without America, we are defenceless. Defenceless. So getting that relationship right is important. And that's going to mean a huge it's going to be Robert's huge headache, but it's going to need a massive reprioritisation of how we spend money, how we save money. But to have a Royal Navy that is currently inoperable is not a viable situation for the future if we want America to be an ally that will come and help us when we need it.
That's right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
There you go.